The main hall of the Adeyemi group glowed white as a jewelry case, and Funk planted herself right in the middle of the walkway, one hand on her hip, the other snapping a finger toward the revolving door. A night shift floor scrubber wants to walk in here. That belly, that necklace you fished out of a bin. You think you can slip into a party for real people? Amara did not step back. She laid one hand on her stomach, and with the other, she touched the chain at her throat. Funk yanked a cleaning rag off the cart and threw it straight at Amara's chest. Out before I call security to drag that pregnant belly to the curb. More than 30 guests in evening dress stood and watched. Not one of them moved. One of them turned his face away and sipped his wine. Amara bent down, picked up the rag, folded it. Then she tilted the back of the necklace into the light. 2 letters cut into the metal, an A and a T. That was the moment Tund stepped out of the elevator. The glass in his hand slid loose and shattered on the stone floor. Funk did not yet know that in 15 minutes, the audit she had buried for 3 years would dig itself up in front of the whole board. Karma always has an address, and it has never once knocked on the wrong door. Hit like, subscribe, and drop the name of the city you're listening from. Before we rewind 3 years, to the day Amara was first pushed out of this very building. 3 years earlier, the Adeyemi group did not look like a jewelry case. It looked like a place where work got done. The lobby had scuffed marble and a coffee machine that ate your coins 2 times out of 5. Amara Adeyemi, no. She was not an Adeyemi yet. She was Amara Okoro then, a name she'd stopped saying out loud within a year. Amara Okoro walked in every morning at 7:40, before her floor filled up, because she liked the quiet. She was a senior accountant. She was very good at it. Numbers did not lie to her the way people did. She had a habit. She'd tell you. It was a small thing. Every time a column balanced, she pressed her thumb once against the edge of her desk. A little tap, like knocking on wood. Her mother had done the same over a butcher's ledger in a market stall for 30 years. Amara didn't notice she did it. Other people did. Tunde. Adeyemi noticed. He was the founder's son, running the finance division back then, before his father's heart gave out and left him the whole thing. He was not a soft man. He had a way of asking a question that made you feel like the answer was already written down somewhere, and you were just failing to read it to him. But with Amara, he asked questions and then actually listened, which is rarer in rich men than people admit. They did not fall in love the way it happens in the films. There was no rain, no music. There was a spreadsheet, a quarterly reconciliation that would not close. 41,000 naira floating loose in a suspense account. And the 2 of them in a conference room at 9 at night, eating cold jollof out of the same takeaway container, because neither would go home until the number was found. Amara found it. A transposition error, 2 digits swapped, buried 9 tabs deep. She pressed her thumb to the table. You do that a lot, Tunde said. Do what? Knock on the desk, when it balances. She looked at her own hand like it belonged to someone else. My mother did it. I didn't know I still did. He did not say anything smooth, he said. Keep doing it, and looked back down at the screen, and something in the room had changed, and both of them knew it, and neither said a word about it for another 4 months. There was a third person in that finance division who saw all of it. Funk Balogun. Funk had been there 2 years longer than Amara. She had a corner desk she'd earned by seniority, and a laugh she used like a tool, loud when a manager could hear it, gone the second they left. She was the one who trained Amara in the first week, who showed her which coffee machine to avoid, and which director never read past the first page of a report. Amara had liked her. That is the part that stayed sharp for years afterward. The small, humiliating splinter of it. Amara had genuinely liked her. Funk had wanted Tund for a long time. Not in the way you want a person. In the way you want a promotion, a good apartment, a name that opens doors. She had done the arithmetic on him the way she did arithmetic on everything. And Amara Okoro, a butcher's daughter with a thumbtap habit, was not supposed to be in the equation at all. Funk had another habit, and this one matters, so hold on to it. She never carried her own access card up to the fourth-floor records room. She'd forget it, or say she forgot it, and borrow someone else's. Just for a second, love. I left mine at my desk, and go up alone. People lent it to her without thinking. She was Funk. She'd been there forever. Amara lent hers more than once. The records room was where the wire transfer authorizations lived. Paper backups, printed and signed, in case the system was ever audited. It was also, though nobody thought about this, the one room in the building where the ceiling camera had been dead for 8 months, because the maintenance ticket kept getting closed as low priority. Funky knew the camera was dead. She'd checked. Here is what she did over the course of that year, and I'm going to tell it to you plainly, because it was a plain crime dressed up later as something complicated. She moved money. Small amounts first, riding inside legitimate vendor payments. A few 100,000 naira skimmed off inflated invoices from a supplier that was really just a bank account she controlled through her cousin. Then larger, she was patient. She was, in her own poisoned way, as good with numbers as Amara was, and every authorization she pushed through, she logged under a borrowed access card. Mostly Amara's. Because Amara lent it without thinking, and because Amara was rising, and because, if it ever came apart, the smartest thing in the world would be to have the newest, most noticed, most invited person holding the match. The engagement happened in the spring. Tunde did not do it at a restaurant. He did it in the same conference room, the cold jollof room, and he did not kneel because he said kneeling was for men who needed the drama to distract from the question. He just asked. She said yes, with her thumb pressed to the table. Funk smiled at the engagement lunch. She brought a card. She wrote something warm in it. Amara kept that card for a long time, too, and later could not decide which was worse. The rag thrown at her chest 3 years on, or the card. The collapse came in October. It came fast, the way these things do, engineered to look like a dam breaking rather than a switch being flipped. An anonymous tip to the board's audit committee. A preliminary internal review. And then a number on a screen in a conference room that was not the cold jollof room. A bigger one. Colder. With the whole finance leadership around the table, and Amara, at the far end, not yet understanding that she was not there as an accountant. She was there as the accused. 11 million naira. Gone over 11 months through wire authorizations logged under her access card. "These are your credentials," said the head of the audit committee, a careful man named Mr. Okonkwo, who did not enjoy this and did it well anyway. "This is your login. These timestamps place the activity during your working hours." "They're not." "I lent my card," Amara said, and heard how it sounded the instant it left her mouth. "I lent my card," the oldest, weakest, guiltiest sounding sentence a person can say. People borrow cards all the time. Everyone does. I lent it to. To whom? And this is the hinge of the whole thing, so watch it turn. Amara opened her mouth to say Funk's name, and she looked down the table, and Funk was looking back at her with an expression of such open, wounded, disappointed sympathy. The exact face of a friend watching a friend. Lie that Amara faltered. For 1 full second she doubted her own memory. Had she lent it to Funk? Or had she just lent it to whoever, generally, and was now grabbing the nearest name to save herself? The doubt was small, and it was fatal, because it showed on her face, and in a room reading her for guilt. 1 second of doubt looked exactly like a court liar, improvising. To whom, Miss Okoro? Mr. Okonkwo asked again gently. I lent it to several people. I can't, so you cannot say. I'm being set up. She said it too loud. In that room at that volume, it landed like every guilty person who has ever said it. Funk spoke then quietly, for the first time. Amara. Her voice cracked beautifully on the second syllable. Why didn't you just tell me you needed money for your mother's treatment? We all would have helped you. You didn't have to do this. Amara had never told Funk her mother was sick. She had told exactly one person in that building. Her mother was sick. She turned and looked at Stunned. He was sitting very still at the head of the table, and his face had gone somewhere she had never seen it go. Somewhere shut and formal, the face he used for hostile vendors. And she understood in a cold, slow wave that Funk had gotten to him first. That whatever had been said in private, over days, drop by drop. Her mother's illness, a fact only he had known, had been fed back into the room as evidence of Amara's motive, and the only way Funk could have known it was from him, and the only way it made sense to him now was if Amara had been lying to everyone all along. And she looked around that table at the faces already closed against her, at Funk's brimming eyes, at the man she was going to marry calling her by her surname, and something in her that had been holding the door shut simply let go. So she said nothing. She stood up. She took off her access card and set it on the table, and she walked out, and the silence behind her was not the silence of people who believed her. She was 4 weeks pregnant that day. She found out 3 days later in a pharmacy bathroom, holding a plastic stick and shaking. And she did not tell him. That was the decision that shaped everything after. And I want you to sit with why she made it, because it is the moral engine of this whole story. And it is not simple. She did not stay silent to punish him. She stayed silent because she had just learned, in the most complete way a person can learn it, that her word was worth nothing against a beautiful lie and a spreadsheet. If she went to Tunde now, pregnant, with no proof, the story wrote itself. The disgraced accountant, caught stealing, plays her last card. She could already hear Funk's soft voice explaining it. And if he looked at her belly, the way he'd looked at her across that table, she would not survive it. She chose the wound she could carry over, the one she couldn't. Amara buried her mother and had her son and named him Akin, which means praise, because she had decided that even a life this stripped down was going to have praise in it if she had to manufacture the praise herself. Now come forward, 3 years, to a building that no longer looks like the place where work gets done. Tunde rebuilt it after his father died. New glass, new name over the door in brushed steel, Adeyemi Group. The marble no longer scuffed, the coffee machine replaced with a thing that costs more than a car and makes a foam leaf on top of your latte. He poured the grief and the guilt of that year into the company, and the company grew monstrous on it. He was, by every measure the market uses, a triumph. He had not married Funk. That is worth saying. Funk had expected him to, in the clean, grateful aftermath of Amara's disgrace, expected to slide into the empty seat, and Tunde had not been able to do it, and could not have told you why, and Funk, who had waited and calculated and won, discovered that the prize had a door that would not fully open. She rose instead. She made herself indispensable. Within 2 years, she was head of financial operations. The very office that once caught a thief, now run by the thief, which is the kind of joke the universe tells with a straight face. And Amara scrubbed floors, not out of failure of ambition. Out of arithmetic, the honest kind. A disgraced accountant with no reference, and an 11 million naira fraud on her name does not get hired to do accounts. She'd tried. The first 18 months were a slammed door with a different logo each time. What she could get Cash, no questions, night shift. So she could be with Akeen in the daytime, was cleaning. She took it, she was not too proud. Pride had been beaten out of her in a cold conference room, and what grew back in its place was harder and quieter, and did not care what a job was called. She was good at that too. She was good at everything she gave herself to. It was almost a curse. She cleaned the way she'd audited, in a system, corner to corner, and the supervisor, who never learned her last name, said she was the best he had. She worked 3 buildings on a rotation, and 11 months ago, the rotation had put her, by an administrative coincidence she had no way to see coming, back inside the Adeyemi group. She did not recognize it at first. The name was the same, but the building was reborn. And she came in at 11 at night, when the executives were gone, and left at 4 before they arrived. And for 11 months, she cleaned the 41st floor of the company that had destroyed her, and never once laid eyes on the man who ran it. That is not a coincidence stretched too far. That is simply what class does in a modern building. It schedules the poor for the hours the rich are asleep, so the two worlds share every surface and never share a room. She cleaned Tundi's office. She wiped the glass of his desk. There was a photograph on a shelf, turned slightly toward the window. And one night she picked it up to dust under it, and it was the two of them. Cold Jollof room. Someone had caught them laughing over the closed reconciliation, and Amara stood in the dark office at 2 in the morning, holding it, and did not cry, because she had used up crying, but she stood there a very long time. Then she set it back at the exact angle she'd found it, because she was a professional, and she finished the floor. She never took anything. I want to be precise about this, because it is where the story turns, and it has to be earned. Amara cleaned the offices of the wealthy for 3 years, and she never took anything, not a pen, not a coin from a desk drawer, not once. And it was not because she was a saint. It was because the one thing they had not been able to take from her in that conference room was the truth of what she actually was. And she was not a thief, and she would die on that hill quietly, in an empty office, at 2 in the morning, with no one watching to give her credit for it. That is the purest kind of honesty there is, the kind with no audience. Then came the night of the folder. It was a Wednesday, 3 weeks before the gala. Amara was cleaning the 40th floor, financial operations, Funk's floor, though she still did not know whose floor it was. Someone had left in a hurry. There was a paper folder half fallen behind a credenza, wedged where the cleaning cart didn't reach, and Amara pulled it out to clean behind it, and it came open in her hands and paper slid across the carpet. She should have just gathered it up. Any sensible person gathers it up and puts it on the desk and moves on. But Amara Okoro had been a senior accountant, and you can take the job from the accountant, but you cannot take the accountant from the eye, and her eye caught, before her judgment could stop it, a wire authorization printout. She crouched there on Funka's carpet at 1 in the morning, and she read it the way she used to read, fast, the whole shape of it at once. It was a vendor payment, a supplier called Meridian Holdings, and something about it was wrong, in a way she felt in her teeth before she could name it. The way you feel a chord is wrong before you know which note. The invoice number sequence didn't breathe right. Real vendors invoice in a rhythm, gaps, weekends, holidays. These were too even, too clean. Someone had generated them to look organic and had been, like all careful liars, a fraction too careful. And then she saw the authorizing credential line, and her own 3-year-old wound opened up cold and precise, because she knew that pattern. She had lived inside that pattern. Payments authorized under one card, always the same window of the day, always when the real holder of the card could be shown to be elsewhere. It was the same architecture. It was the exact same crime. Someone in this building was running the identical scheme that had been hung around her neck, and whoever it was had been doing it for a while, and was good, and was still here. Amara knelt on the carpet with the paper in her hand and understood 3 things in the space of about 10 seconds. 1, she had, by pure accident, found proof that the machine which convicts people like her is real and reusable, and was being used again in this very building. 2, whoever was doing this was almost certainly the same person who had done it to her, because the method is a signature and criminals reuse what works. 3, she was a night cleaner, holding a stolen glance at a document she had no right to have seen, and if she said one word, the story would write itself again. The disgraced ex-accountant, the known thief, caught going through the papers of the very department that fired her, no doubt trying to steal or extort. Every true thing she said would sound like a better lie again. She had a choice on that carpet, and both roads were open, and I'm not going to pretend the ugly one wasn't real. She could have photographed it. She could have used it. A woman with a fatherless child and a name in ruins, holding the thing that could ransom the person who ruined her. There is a version of Amara that stands up off that carpet and becomes something hard and transactional, and nobody watching would have blamed her much. That is not what she did. She gathered every page. She squared the stack, the way you square a stack, tapped it on the carpet, and she put it back in the folder, and she stood, and she set the folder squatter in the center of the desk, where its owner would find it and know it had been seen. And then, because she was an accountant before she was anything and an honest one to the marrow, she did the one thing that would turn out to matter more than all the rest. On the cleaning log by the door, the sheet, where night staff initial each room and note anything unusual, a genuine document, dated, time-stamped, filmed by the working lobby camera when she dropped it in the box at shift's end. She wrote one careful line in her small square hand, found finance documents on floor behind credenza, RM 4011, returned to desk. Possible filing error, recommend review. She did not sign her full name. She signed the initials the agency used for night staff. She went home. She made Akeen his breakfast at 5 in the morning, with her eyes burning. And she told herself she had done the right thing. And the right thing had, as usual, changed nothing. She was wrong about that. That the cleaning log went where cleaning logs go, into a facilities file. Nobody reads. But it was dated. It was time-stamped. It existed in writing, outside Funk's control, 3 weeks before anything else happened, and it placed a set of specific finance documents in a specific room on a specific night, with an honest note recommending review. Amara did not know it yet, but she had just fired the first shot, and she'd fired it not with a threat, but with the truth. Quietly, the way she pressed her thumb to a desk when a column balanced. Here is the thing about buildings that grow monstrous. They attract watchers. Tundi had taken the company public in the 2nd year, and public companies get audited by people who do not care whose office it is. And that spring the board had hired an outside firm to do a full forensic review of financial operations, ahead of a new bond issue. Routine. Box ticking. The kind of thing that finds nothing 99 times out of 100. The lead auditor was a woman named Ada Nwosu. She was 51. She had done this for 26 years, and she had the specific gift of the great forensic accountant, which is not brilliance. It is patience combined with a total immunity to being charmed. Funk could not charm her. Funk tried. Funk was warm and helpful, and produced every document promptly and made the coffee and Ada Nwosu wrote, in her notebook, in her own private shorthand, the single word over helpful, and underlined it. Ada found the Meridian Holdings payments the way Amara had found them, by the rhythm. Because that is how they are always found. She pulled the vendor file. She requested the wire authorizations. And she asked facilities, as forensic auditors always do, because it is on their checklist, and no one else ever thinks it matters, for the badge access logs, and the maintenance records, and the visitor logs, and the cleaning logs, for the relevant floors for the relevant period. A junior facilities clerk, bored, printed her everything, including a night cleaning log with a small square handwritten note 3 weeks old. Found finance documents on floor behind credenza R, M4011, returned to desk. Possible filing error, recommend review. Ada Nwasu read that line and stopped. She read it again. A cleaner had found finance documents loose on the floor, in the room where her own audit had just located the anomalous vendor. And this was the part that made her sit back, recommended review. A thief does not recommend review. A person covering something does not write it down and date it. This was an honest note, and honest notes in a dishonest file are the loose thread you pull. She went, looking for the badge logs on the Meridian authorizations. And here is where Funk's one clever, patient, fatal habit finally turned on her. 3 years late, every Meridian wire had been authorized under a borrowed access card. Funk had never used her own. Across 2 years, she had used the cards of 6 different colleagues, always people who were demonstrably elsewhere at the moment of authorization, so that the card holder always had an alibi. And the transaction always looked like it belonged to someone careless rather than someone criminal. It was, honestly, elegant. It had one flaw, and it was the flaw of all elegant crimes. It required a person who was always in the room and never on the card. Subtract every cardholder who had an alibi, and one silhouette remained, the same silhouette, in the room every single time, holding no card of her own. Ada Nwasu did not need to prove Funky used the cards. She needed only to prove Funky was the constant. She built a grid 6 cards, 31 transactions, 2 years, every cardholder placed elsewhere by their own badge data. At the moment their card was used 4 floors up, and one person pulled from the 40th floor badge logs, from the parking gate, from the very coffee machine payment records. Tunde had installed to track spending physically present in the building, on the correct floor. In the correct 15-minute window, 31 times out of 31. Confidence in Ada Nwasu's private notebook moved from moderate to high. Then she pulled the archived records, room, camera footage, expecting nothing, because the room where the paper authorizations were kept had a camera that had been dead for years. It was dead now. But Tunde's renovation had added a second camera in the corridor outside, a good one, and it had not been dead. And it had been quietly filming the door of the records room for the entire period. Ada requested the corridor footage for the 31 windows. It took a technician 9 days to pull it all. It was worth the 9 days. One figure. Same walk, same badge tap. On the borrowed cards, in and out with a folder. The corridor camera had a clock burned into the corner, and the clock matched the wire timestamps to the minute. And there was one more thing, the smallest thing, the thing that turns a strong case into a case a person confesses to. In the 4th month of the scheme, Funk had sent an email. Not a stupid one. Funk was not stupid, but a human one. To her cousin, the one whose bank account was Meridian Holdings, and it said only, in careful, vague language, that the next disbursement would be delayed a week because there was too much attention on the department right now, and she needed things quiet. She had deleted it. She had deleted it from her sent folder the same afternoon. She had not known, because most people do not know, that a company under a bond issue puts a legal hold on all email, and mirrors it to an archive the moment the process begins, and that the archive does not care what you delete from your own folder, and that a forensic auditor with a subpoena reads the archive, not your folder. Ada Nwosu had all of it 2 weeks before the gala. The grid, the corridor footage, the email, and the piece that made her sit back a second time. And an honest little cleaning note that had flagged the exact room 3 weeks before her audit ever reached it. Written by someone the file listed only as night agency staff. Initials only, no full name. She wrote in her notebook, "Who is the cleaner?" and underlined it twice. Because Ada Nwosu had done this for 26 years, and she knew that the honest note in the dishonest file is never an accident. And she wanted to know whose eye had caught it, and she had a slow, cold suspicion. The kind you don't write down yet. That the person who had spotted this crime by its rhythm had spotted it, because they had felt that exact rhythm close around their own throat once before. She took the whole thing to the board's audit committee, still chaired, 3 years on, by the same careful Mr. Okonkwo, and Mr. Okonkwo, reading the file, went very quiet, because he remembered. He remembered a young woman at the far end of a cold table saying, "I lent my card, and I'm being set up in a voice that cracked wrong," and he remembered signing off on her guilt, and he remembered that he had not enjoyed it, and had done it well anyway. And he understood now, holding Ada Nwosu's grid, that doing an unjust thing well is worse than doing it badly. Because at least a badly done injustice leaves a seam. His had been seamless. He had helped make it seamless. The board decided to present the findings at the annual gala. This was Tunde's decision, and it was not sentimental. It was strategic and cold in a way that will matter. The bond investors would all be in the room. The press would be there. And getting ahead of a fraud publicly, showing the market that the Adeyemi Group cleaned its own house in the open, was worth more than a quiet firing. Funk would be there. She would be given no warning. And the auditors would present. Tunde did not know, walking into his own gala that night, that the fraud they were about to expose was the twin of the one that had taken Amara from him 3 years before. He had not connected them. He had spent 3 years not thinking about Amara Okoro at all, with the specific muscular effort of a man not thinking about the one thing, and he had convinced himself the effort was indifference. And Amara, who cleaned the 41st floor and had written one honest line on a log 3 weeks earlier and gone home to make breakfast, had been told by her agency that night staff were needed early. For the gallo extra hands, the building had to sparkle. Come at 9 instead of 11. Use the service entrance. Stay out of the guests' way. She came at 9. She used the service entrance, and at some point in the crush of a 500-person gala, a night cleaner in a grey uniform with a pregnant belly took a wrong corridor with a supply cart and came out into the wrong end of the main hall, the bright end, the jewelry case end, exactly as the guests were arriving, and Funkabalagan keyed up, brittle, closer to the edge, that night than anyone in that glittering room. Could see turned and saw a floor scrubber standing in her light. You already know the first 30 seconds of what happened next, because you watched it at the top of this story. The snap of the fingers, the rag thrown at the chest, the 30 guests who did not move. The man who turned away and sipped his wine. Now you know who everyone is, so let it play again, slower, and watch what it costs. A night shift floor scrubber wants to walk in here. Funka's voice went up and out, pitched to carry, because Funk had spent her whole life performing for whoever might be watching. And there were 200 people watching now. That belly, that necklace you fished out of a bin. You think you can slip into a party for real people? It was the necklace that had set her off. She hadn't even registered the face yet. She'd seen, on a cleaner, a thing that cleaners don't own, a fine chain, gold, old but real, and the wrongness of it had reached into Funk's chest and squeezed. Because Funk's entire life was built on the belief that the categories are fixed, that some people own fine things, and some people fish rags out of carts, and a cleaner wearing gold was a crack in the world's foundation. And she moved to seal it the way she sealed everything, by force, in front of an audience. Amara did not step back. That is the whole story in one sentence. And I want you to feel it before the machinery of justice takes over. Because the justice is going to be loud and satisfying. And it is not actually the point. The point is a woman who had been broken in a room 3 years before, who had every reason to fold, who had spent 3 years being scheduled for the hours the powerful sleep. That woman heard herself called a thing and did not step back. She laid one hand on her stomach, over Akeen's brother or sister, 4 months along now, and with the other hand she touched the chain at her throat, and she stood in the light she was not supposed to be standing in. Funk yanked the rag off the cart and threw it. Out, before I call security to drag that pregnant belly to the curb. Amara bent, picked up the rag, folded it, corner to corner the way she folded everything, and the folding was not submission. It was the opposite. It was a person refusing to be made frantic, refusing to give the audience the flailing they'd come to see. And then, and she did this slowly, she turned the back of the necklace up into the light. 2 letters, cut by hand into old gold. A.T. Tunde had given it to her the night of the reconciliation, weeks before the engagement, before he had words for what he felt. He'd had it made from a coin his father gave him, A&T Amara and Tunde. She had worn it for 3 years under her uniform, against her skin, the one thing she had not sold when her mother was dying, and she turned it up now, not to accuse anyone, not as a play. She turned it up because a woman being called a bin scavenger in front of 200 people reached, in her deepest reflex, for the one true thing she owned, the way you grab a railing. Tun stepped out of the elevator into his own gala. He saw, in this order, a commotion. Funk, a cleaner, a rag on the floor. Gold at the cleaner's throat catching the light, 2 letters. And then the face above the letters, older, thinner, harder, 3 years gone. The face he had spent 3 years not thinking about, with all his strength. The glass left his hand. Nobody saw him decide to drop it. His hand simply stopped being a thing that held objects. It hit the marble and burst, and the sound of it, a single hard crack, in a room full of soft party noise, turned every head. And for 1 second, the whole gala was silent, and looking at the founder of the Adeyemi group, standing frozen with his hand, still curled around a glass that was now in pieces at his feet, staring at a pregnant cleaner, as though she were a person returned from the dead, which to him she was. Amara, he said. Not Miss Okoro. It came out of him unmediated from underneath 3 years of construction's voice of the man in the cold jollof room. Amara. Funk's head snapped around, and across her face, for the first time in the whole story, something moved that she could not control, because Funk had built everything, every layer of it, on the certainty that Amara Okoro was gone, disgraced and vanished, and never coming back, a closed account. And here was Tunde saying her name like a wound reopening, and here was the necklace, and here Funk's mind was already sprinting ahead of the rest of the room. Here, tonight, was the audit. And for 1 vertiginous second Funka Balagun understood that she did not know how much anyone knew, and a person who has built everything on knowing exactly what everyone knows cannot survive the discovery that she has lost track. She recovered fast. She was good. Tun, do you know this woman? A small laugh, incredulous, Generous. My God, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I just found her wandering the guest floor. She's clearly, the poor thing's clearly, not well. Look at her. We should call someone. Stop talking, Tundity said. He did not raise his voice. That was somehow worse. He was walking toward Amara, now across the marble, glass crunching under his shoes, 200 people parting for him. And he stopped in front of her close enough to see that the necklace was real. That it was the necklace. And he looked at her belly, and then at her face, and something was breaking open in him in real time. And it was not a good feeling. It was the specific agony of a man realizing the ground he has stood on for 3 years was never there. Where did you go? He said quietly. Just for her. And Amara, who had rehearsed 1,000 versions of this moment in 1,002 a.m. offices and had believed every single time that she would be calm, was not calm. You called me Mzokoro, she said. Her voice shook. You sat at the head of the table, and you called me Mzokoro. And you asked if I had another explanation. And I looked at you, and you looked at the table. Each word cost her. I had another explanation, Tunde. I was carrying it. I was 4 weeks carrying your explanation, and I walked out of that room because I knew that nothing I said would ever be louder than her. She did not point at Funk. She didn't need to. Every true thing I said was going to sound like a better lie. So I stopped saying true things for 3 years. The room had gone from a party to something else. 200 people who had come for champagne and networking were standing in a widening silence around a cleaner and a billionaire. And at the edge of it, Mr. Okonkwo had gone white. Because he understood before anyone that the 2 things, the woman and the audit folder tucked under Ada Nwasu's arm across the room, were about to become one thing. It was Ada Nwosu who made them one thing. She had been standing near the small dais, where, in 20 minutes per the evening's careful program, she was to present the forensic findings to the board and the assembled investors. She had been watching the whole scene with her forensic patients, and she had heard the cleaner say she'd been convicted 3 years ago on a wire fraud scheme run through a borrowed access card. And Ada Nwosu, who had spent 2 years of her life reconstructing that exact scheme running live in this exact building, felt every hair on her arms stand up. She crossed the room. She did not hurry. Ada Nwosu never hurried. She stopped beside Tundi, and she said in a voice that was not loud, but had 26 years of not being charmed in it, Mr. Adeyemi, I think you should hear the audit now. Not in 20 minutes now, and I think. She turned her steady eyes on Amara. This woman should stay in the room. What happened on that little dais over the next 15 minutes was not a magic trick. I want to be clear about that, because stories like this usually cheat at the end. A secret twin, a deathbed confession, a letter that falls from a coat. There was none of that. What took Funke Balogun apart was the most ordinary thing in the modern world. Data kept by machines that don't take sides, read out by a 51-year-old woman with a notebook. Ada Nwosu did not accuse anyone at first. She simply presented. She put the Meridian Holdings payments on the screen and walked the room through the invoice rhythm, the 2-even sequence, and you could feel 200 financially literate people begin to lean forward, because they all knew that rhythm was wrong the second she showed it. She showed the 11 million, no, this time it was larger, 38 million, naira over 2 years, routed to a shell account. She showed the 31 wire authorizations, and then she showed the access cards. Each of these authorizations, she said, was made using an employee access card, 6 different employees, and each time, the employee whose card was used can be placed elsewhere in the building, or outside it entirely, by their own badge data at the exact minute of the transaction. She let that sit, which means in every single case, someone was using a card that was not their own. She put up the grid. 6 cards, 31 transactions, every real card holder grayed out with an alibi. And then she put up the one figure who was never grayed out, present on the correct floor in the correct window 31 times out of 31. And she did not say a name. She let the room do the arithmetic. And the room, full of people who did arithmetic for a living, did it. And 200 heads turned, slowly, not toward the screen, but toward Funk Balogun, standing frozen by the champagne, with a glass she had forgotten she was holding. This is absurd, Funk said. Borrowed cards. Present in the building. Half this room was present in the building. This proves nothing. Ada, you know it proves nothing. You're right, Ada said. And something in the mildness of it was terrible. Presence alone proves nothing so. She nodded to the technician. The corridor camera outside the records room. 31 clip-outs, I'll show 3. The footage came up. The burned-in clock in the corner. The door of the records room. And Funk unmistakable. No ambiguity. Her walk, her posture. The borrowed card in her hand. Tapping in, coming out with a folder. 3 times. 3 different dates. 3 timestamps that matched 3 wire authorizations to the minute. The room made a sound. Not a gasp, something lower. The sound 200 people make when a thing they suspected becomes a thing they have seen. And finally, Ada said, and here she allowed herself, for the first and only time, something close to satisfaction. An email, sent in the 4th month, deleted the same afternoon from the sender's folder, preserved, as all correspondence was, under the legal hold for the bond issue. She put it on the screen. Funk's own careful words to her cousin. The delay, the too much attention, the need for quiet. The recipient is the registered owner of Meridian Holdings. He is the sender's first cousin. Funk Balogun stood in the light. She had thrown a rag at another woman for standing in, and the light did not spare her one detail. And here is the thing I most want you to see. The thing that is easy to miss under the sweetness of the comeuppance. Funk did not break down, she did not confess. Not really. She looked around that room, at 200 faces that had adored her an hour ago, and now looked at her the way that other room had once looked at Amara. And she reached instantly, by pure reflex, the way Amara had reached for the necklace len. She reached for the same weapon she had always used. Amara Okoro put those documents where you'd find them, Funk said, fast, pointing across the room. She's a convicted fraud. She cleans this building. She has access to everything. She planted this to frame me because she blames me for blunder. The cleaning log, said Adanawosu, is dated 3 weeks before my audit reached that room. It recommends review, and it is signed by agency initials, filmed by the lobby camera, logged in facilities. A person planting a frame does not file a dated note recommending that the documents be reviewed. She looked at Funkuk with 26 years of immunity to being charmed. You keep using her, even now. You used her card. You used her name. You used her 3 years ago to end an audit. And standing here, you reached for her again, before you reached for anything true. That is the tell, Miss Balogun. That has always been the tell. An innocent person reaches for the truth. You have reached for Amara Okoro every single time. It was Mr. Okonkwo who spoke then, and it cost him. You could see it cost him. He stood up in front of the whole gala, the careful man, and he said, 3 years ago, I chaired the committee that convicted this woman. He gestured at Amara of exactly this crime. I signed it. I did it thoroughly, and I was wrong. And I was wrong because the evidence had been built to make me wrong by the person standing there. And because it was easier to believe a butcher's daughter had stolen than to believe the colleague we all trusted. I want that on the record tonight, in this room, in front of these people. Because 3 years ago, we ended her in a private room with the door closed, and the least I can do is be wrong out loud in the light. where being wrong belongs. The security team was already moving. The board had counsel present, because Tunda planned everything. The police had been quietly notified before the presentation even began, because a fraud of this size is a crime and not merely a firing, and this is the no magic rule holding to the very end. Funk Balagan was not struck by lightning and did not fall on her own sword. She was arrested at a gala by 2 officers who read her the charges while 200 people watched, and she was walked out through the revolving door she had ordered Amara dragged out of, and the last thing anyone heard from her was not a confession and not an apology, but her voice, still performing, still pitched to carry, insisting to the officers that they had no idea who she was. She was right about that. They didn't. That was always the answer to her whole life. Nobody ever did. The gala did not recover, and nobody tried to make it. The investors left with a story better than any speech Tunde could have given them. A company that exposes its own rot in public, in real time, and the bond issue. In one of the small ironies the universe hands out, closed oversubscribed the following month. The market rewards a house that cleans itself in the open. Amara had been right about that 3 years ago, though nobody had let her say it. The truth, told in the light, is worth more than the lie kept quiet. It had just taken the building 3 years to learn what the accountant had always known. They cleared the hall, and in the emptying room, among the abandoned champagne flutes and the ground in glass, from a dropped tumbler, Tunde Adeyemi and Amara Okoro stood facing each other for the first time in 3 years with no table between them. He tried to speak and couldn't, then he did. "I have to say the thing," he said. "And then? You never have to hear from me again if you don't want to. I didn't believe you. I had one thing to do when the whole world was telling me you were guilty. I had to be the one person who knew you and didn't believe it. And I couldn't do it. I looked at the table. You said my name. And I looked at the table." His voice did something it had not done in front of another human being in 3 years. And I told myself for 3 years that the evidence made it reasonable. It did make it reasonable. That's the worst part. She built it well enough that not believing you was the reasonable choice. And I've learned exactly one thing since, and it's that when you love someone, being reasonable is not the job. The job is to be the one who doesn't look at the table. I had one job. I failed it in front of everyone. And then I failed it again in private every day. For 3 years. By not looking for you. Amara did not fall into his arms. I want to be honest about this ending, because the sweet lie would be that the necklace turns up, and the man says, sorry, and the years close over like water. They don't. Amara had built a whole self out of surviving what he did. She had a son named Praise who had never met his father. She had scrubbed the floor of this exact building for 11 months. Had dusted the photograph of the 2 of them at 2 in the morning. Had folded a rag corner to corner an hour ago, rather than give an audience the sight of her breaking. She was not going to dissolve now because the arithmetic had finally come out in her favor. I have a son, she said. His name is Ikeen. He's 3. She watched that land, watched Tund understand the shape and the timing of it, watched 3 years rearrange themselves behind his eyes. Praise. I named him Praise because I decided a life. This stripped down was going to have praise in it, if I had to make the praise myself. He doesn't know you. I'm not going to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen, because a screen finally showed the truth. The truth was always true. It was true in that room when you looked at the table. It didn't need a camera. I did. Her voice held. So no, Tunde, I'm not going to marry you tonight and cry into your jacket and let the music swell. I'm going to go home to my son, and tomorrow, or next week, if you want to earn something, you can start with him, at his level. slowly, and find out whether the man who couldn't look at me across a table can look at a 3-year-old who's never needed him and doesn't know he exists. That's the audit I care about now, not the one on the screen. And Tundi Ademi, who had built a monster of a company out of guilt and grief, who had everything the market can measure and had failed the one thing it can't, said the only correct thing, which was, okay, not a speech, not a plea. Okay, I'll start where you say and at the speed you say. It was the first time in the whole story he had let someone else hold the ledger. The restoration was not a fairy tale, and it was better than one, because it was real. The conviction was vacated, legally, formally, in a courtroom, on the strength of Ada Nwosu's grid, and the corridor footage, and the archived email, and one honest cleaning log. Amara Okoro's name was cleared in the same public record that had ruined it, which is the only place clearing a name actually counts. The company paid her 3 years of the salary she'd have earned, plus damages, because Tunde's own counsel advised it, and because Tunde would have paid 10 times it, and been grateful for the chance. She took it. She was not too proud. Pride had been beaten out of her in a cold room 3 years before, and what grew back did not care about the optics of accepting what you are owed. She used part of it to buy her mother a proper headstone, the kind with room for a full name and both dates and a line beneath. And on the line she had them carve knock knock, the account balanced, and only 3 people in the world would ever understand it. And that was enough. Funk Balagon was convicted. No lightning, no karma as magic. Just the slow, grinding certainty of 31 time-stamped clips, and an email she thought she'd deleted. She got 7 years and full restitution she would spend the rest of her life failing to pay. And in the one moment the story allows itself something like mercy, Amara went to see her once, in the visiting room, and did not gloat and did not forgive, because forgiveness was not owed, and gloating was beneath her. She went for one reason, and she said one thing. You told that room I stole because my mother was sick. She was sick. She died. And you used the one true thing you knew about me to bury me. She stood up to leave. I just wanted you to see the face of the person you were so sure would never come back. That's all. I wanted you to know the categories aren't fixed. That's the thing you never believed, and it's the thing that ruined you. Some cleaner is always wearing gold under the uniform. Funk. You just never bothered to look. She did not wait for an answer. There wasn't going to be a good one. Ikeen met his father slowly, at his own level, over months, the way Amara had demanded. Tunde did not buy the boy's affection. Amara would not have permitted it, and he understood, finally, that permission mattered. He showed up. He was on time. He learned that praise liked to line his toy cars up in a perfect row and press his thumb against the floor. When the row was straight, knock, a habit no one had taught him. A habit that had come down through a butcher's stall ledger and a night shift cleaning log into the hands of a 3-year-old. And the first time Tundi saw the boy do it, he had to leave the room. And Amara let him go and did not follow. And when he came back, his eyes were red, and neither of them said anything, and something, very carefully, began. They did not marry for a long time, and when they did it was small, and Amara wore the necklace on the outside of her dress for once. A and T in old gold, catching the light in a room where nobody would ever again tell her she didn't belong in it. But that is not where I'll leave you. Because a wedding is the easy image, and this was never an easy story. I'll leave you in the lobby of the Adeyemi group, months before any of the soft ending at 4 in the morning, when it was still just a night cleaner and an empty building. Because on the last night Amara worked her shift. She finished the rotation properly. She was a professional to the end. She would not walk off a job half done, even that one. She cleaned the 41st floor one final time, and she picked up the photograph on the shelf to dust beneath it, the two of them laughing over a closed reconciliation a lifetime ago. And she did not put it back at the exact angle. This time, she turned it very slightly, so it faced the room instead of the window, so that anyone who came in would see it. And then she signed the cleaning log, the same log that had already done more than she'd ever know. And under the last room she wrote, out of pure habit, the small true note of a person who had spent her whole life leaving honest records in files. Nobody reads. Floor 41, complete. Nothing out of place. I want to say something before you go in my own voice, because this one stayed with me while I was telling it. The part that I keep turning over isn't the fraud or the cameras, it's the schedule. How a building can be honest enough to put the poor to work in the hours the rich are asleep, so that the two of them share every floor and never once share a room. Amara wasn't invisible because of magic. She was invisible because we build the world to make her that way. And then we're shocked when the woman with the mop turns out to have carried the whole answer the entire time. So here's the only thing I'll ask of you tonight. Tomorrow, look at the person cleaning the floor, driving the car, carrying the tray. Learn one name. Because dignity isn't something a camera restores at the end of the story. It's something we owe people at the beginning, before we know who they are, before the gold shows under the uniform. If you or someone you love is being pushed out of a workplace on a lie, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is real, and it answers. If an older person you love is being controlled through their money, the National Council on Aging Helpline, 1-800-677-111-SUCKS, is real too. Write one of those down for someone. And if this story meant anything to you, tell me in the comments the name of one person you decided to really see this week. She was invisible because we build the world to make her that way. And then we're shocked when the woman with the mop turns out to have carried the whole answer the entire time. So here's the only thing I'll ask of you tonight. Tomorrow, look at the person cleaning the floor, driving the car, carrying the tray. Learn one name, because dignity isn't something a camera restores at the end of the story. It's something we owe people at the beginning, before we know who they are, before the gold shows under the uniform. If you or someone you love is being pushed out of a workplace on a lie, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is real and it answers. If an older person you love is being controlled through their money, the National Council on Aging Helpline, 1-800-677-111-SUCKS, is real too. Write one of those down for someone. And if this story meant anything to you, tell me in the comments the name of one person you decided to really see this week. House girl. Kemi's voice sliced the ballroom. She tilted the crystal and poured red wine straight down Amara's grey uniform, the stain blooming across her chest like a slow wound. You thought a tray put you near my husband? Go scrub a toilet. The glass shattered at Amara's feet. 80 guests in Ikoyi silk froze. Not one voice raised, not one hand offered, not one champagne flute lowered. Amara did not cry. She knelt in the wine and the shards, picked up each piece with steady fingers, and looked Kemi dead in the eye. Her copper bracelet slipped, rolled across marble, and stopped at the polished shoe of the billionaire who had just walked in. Tunde Adeyemi looked down, and he froze. What Kemi Balogun did not know was that in 40 minutes, 3 empires would collapse in that room, and the debt Tunde owed, the woman kneeling in wine, was one no stock certificate on earth could ever pay. Karma keeps an address book, my friend, and tonight it knocked on the front door. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop the city you're watching from in the comments. Because to understand why a billionaire froze at the sight of a house girl, we have to walk back to a rainy night on the 3rd floor of Lagos University Teaching Hospital, August the 12th, 2010. It was raining, the kind of Lagos rain that does not fall so much as it presses. The garters on Idiaraba Road had given up around 9 o'clock. By 11, the third-floor corridor at Luth smelled of wet concrete, old iodine, and the particular sourness of grief that hospitals never quite scrub out. The light in that corridor was fluorescent and yellow, and it flickered every 18 seconds. Amaran Wasu had counted. She had been in that corridor for a total of 11 days over the last 4 months, and she had learned every stain on the ceiling. She was 18 years old. She was sitting on a green plastic chair with a small envelope in her lap. Inside the envelope, 50,000 naira in 5 wrinkled bundles, tied with a rubber band that used to be red. It was the money the neighbors had brought to her mother's funeral 3 days earlier. The neighbors were market women mostly. Iya Sikira had brought 7,000. Mama Hankiru had brought 12,000, which was more than Mama Hankiru could afford, but nobody said so. The rest was in small bundles of 1 and 2,000 naira. Folded so many times the notes had gone soft. Amara's mother had died on a straw mat in this same corridor. Suspected kidney failure, the doctor had said, when he finally had time to say anything. 6 weeks earlier, a general practitioner in Mushin had told them it was probably just malaria and prescribed chloroquine. By the time they got to Luth, she had needed dialysis. Dialysis cost 42,000 naira a session, and by the 3rd session there had been no more money, and by the 5th session her mother had stopped asking. Amara had held her hand for the last 3 days. Her mother had not said anything much. Once, on the 2nd afternoon, she had opened her eyes and looked at Amara and said, "The copper bracelet, give it to your daughter one day. Tell her it is from her grandmother." Then she had closed her eyes again. She had died at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday. Amara had walked out of Luth into the pre-dawn dark and taken the first molu to Yaba. She had not spoken to anyone for 3 days. After that, the funeral had been small. The pastor had come. The yam trader in Ayana Ipaja, to whom her father owed 41,000 naira for the year's stock, had also come, but he had not stayed for the food. He had stood at the back and made a point of being seen. Amara understood the message. She had not cried at the funeral. She was not going to cry now. She was going to take this money, walk to Iana Ipaja, pay her father's remaining debt to the yam trader, and start again. She had a plan. She had exactly 13 items on a small blue list folded in her back pocket. And then she heard the boy. He was maybe 14. He was on his knees at the cashier's window, not shouting, not fighting, just quietly refusing to stand up. His mother was in surgery 2 doors down. She had been hit by a Malu on Badagry Expressway. The boy kept saying the same sentence, over and over, like a prayer that had lost its words. "Please, please, they will not close her up, please. It is only 47,000 more, please." The cashier was a woman with tired eyes and a cross around her neck. She was not cruel. She had said no 11 times already, because she had a supervisor and a system and a queue of families behind him with the same story. Amara watched the boy for maybe 40 seconds. She thought about her mother on the straw mat. She thought about the yam trader in Iana Paja, who was going to take everything her father had, because that was how debt worked in this city. She thought about the exact face her father had made 2 years earlier when he learned that the hospital in Ibadan would not accept his goat as collateral. She thought about all the money that had passed under all the cashier windows in this country, and how none of it had ever bought her mother one more session of dialysis. She thought about the boy's shoulders shaking under his school uniform. It was still on. It was as Finbar's college. She had recognized the crest. And then she stood up. She walked to the cashier's window. She untied the rubber band. She counted out 47,000 naira, slowly, 1,000 at a time, and pushed the money under the glass. The cashier looked up at her and did not say anything. Her eyes did something that Amara chose not to look at. Amara kept 3,000 naira for the Danfo home. She folded the bracelet money back into the envelope. She did not give the boy her name. She did not want it. She did not want a debt on him. She bent down to where he was still on his knees on the tile, and she said one sentence, quiet as the rain. "Don't let your mother die like mine did." Then she walked out of Luth into the rain, and she did not look back once. She walked to the bus stop. She waited 19 minutes for a Maloo. She got home to her father's compound in Iyana Ipaja at 4:30 in the morning, and she gave the 3,000 naira to her father, and she said, "Papa, the money is finished. We are starting again." Her father did not ask what had happened to the rest. He was too tired. He just nodded and went back to sleep on the sofa. The boy's name was Tundi. He was on his knees for another full minute before he understood what had happened. By the time he stood up and looked at the cashier, she was already sliding the receipt across. She said only one thing to him: "Go and sit with your mother. She will come out of theater in about 90 minutes. Tunde ran out into the parking lot. He ran into the rain. He ran to the front gate. He ran to the bus stop. The girl was gone. All he had was the memory of a copper bracelet on a thin wrist, an accent that was slightly Ibo, and a voice that would live in his skull for the next 15 years. He went back inside. He sat on the green plastic chair his benefactor had sat on. He took out a notebook from his school bag. He wrote down in the round handwriting of a 14-year-old boy one sentence: "I owe her my mother's life." Then, because he did not know her surname, he wrote her first name 6 times: Chi Amara, Chitamara. He did not know why. He had used the Ibo honorific for older sister. He had heard it once from a friend at school. It had felt right. Now, come back to today. Amara Nwosu is 33. She lives in a one-room in Ajagunle. Rent 19,000 naira a month, tin roof. One plastic chair, one gas cooker, one framed photograph of her mother from 1996. The mechanic bangs metal from 6:30 in the morning. Amara wakes at 4:45. She boils water on the single-burner gas cooker. She bathes with half a bucket. Because the borehole in the compound is slow in the dry season and everybody has to share. She irons her grey uniform on the bed, because there is no ironing board, and she does not own the iron. It belongs to Ia Latif in the next room, who lets her use it in exchange for 2 puff-puff a week. She leaves the compound at 5:50. She catches the first bus to Ojwalegba, then a kek to Falamo. She has been doing this route for 6 years. She knows the drivers. She knows which conductor will shortchange her. She knows which stretch of Ikorodu Road will flood if the rain does not stop by 6. Her brother Chuka is finishing his final year at Unilag, mechanical engineering, and every kobo of his school fees comes out of her hands. She has never told Chuka how many jobs she works. He thinks she cleans 2 houses. He thinks she is fine. She likes it that way. She calls him on Sundays, and she tells him about the funny things she saw in traffic that week. She does not tell him about the woman in Ikoyi, who has fired 4 of her colleagues in 3 months. She works 3 jobs. Mornings, she cleans the Adeyemi residence in Ikoyi through a domestic agency called Clean Grace. Evenings, she fries and sells puff-puff at the junction near Ojwalegba, next to a woman named Mama Ope, who sells fried yam, and they share a bench and a small blue umbrella. And Mama Ope has 3 grandchildren, whose names Amara has memorized because she likes to be asked about them. Nights, when she can stand it, she takes overnight cleaning at a private clinic in Sualir. 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., 17,000 naira a week. She has slept an average of 4.5 hours a night for the last 6 years. She has not been to a party since her mother's funeral. She wears her mother's copper bracelet every day. She does not talk about the night at Luth. She has not told Chuka. She has not told anyone. She does not think it is a story. She thinks it is just a thing that happened. The way rain is just a thing that falls. Tundeyemi is 29. He runs a Deyemi farmer out of an office on Ozumba Nembadiwi, 42 floors, 700 employees, a market cap that made the business day cover last April. His mother Halima Adeyemi lives with him in the Ikoi house. 62 years old. One titanium hip from the 2010 accident. And a memory that is slower than it used to be but not gone. Tunde has a copy of a hospital receipt in a leather notebook in his top drawer. He takes it out sometimes. The handwriting on it is not his. He has never stopped looking for the woman who wrote his mother's future in it. 6 months ago, he got engaged to Kemi Balagun. She is 26. She is the only daughter of Chief Adwail Balagun, who owns Balagun Ingredients. Lelti, the company that supplies 81% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients that go into Adeyemi Pharma's generics. The marriage is a merger. Everybody in the room knows this. The board knows. Tun's mother knows. Tun knows. Kemi knows most of all, and it has made her a specific kind of person. She has moved into the Ikoyi house 3 months ago. In 3 months, she has fired 4 housekeepers. The first was a woman named Grace, 51, from Ebony State, 3 children in school back home. Kemi accused her of stealing a lipstick and had her held at Falomo Station for 48 hours. Grace was released with no charges. She did not come back to work. The second was named Blessing, 29, from Cross River. Kemi accused her of looking at me with disrespect in her eyes and had the mopal drag her out of the compound at 10 in the evening. Walked to Nuyaba because she had no money for a bus. The third, a quiet older woman named Iya Remy, was accused of feeding Kemi's dogs the wrong food and made to stand in the sun for 2 hours as a lesson, after which she went home and did not speak for 7 days. Her family thought she had had a stroke. She had not. She had simply decided that silence was cheaper than words. The fourth was a 19-year-old girl named Favor, who Kemi threw a Christian Louboutin shoe at because Favor had not folded a towel the way Kemi liked it. The heel of the shoe cut Favor's forehead. Tundi was not at home for any of these events. He had been told about none of them. Halima Adeyemi had been told about all of them, and had wept quietly upstairs each time, and had not known what to say to her son that would not sound like she was picking sides in a marriage that had not happened yet. The domestic agency is running out of women willing to take the Ikoyi contract, and Clean Grace has started paying a hazard bonus of 9,000 naira on top of the regular fee. The office manager at Clean Grace, a woman named Funmi, quietly warned every woman she sent. She warned them what Kemi was like. She told them to keep their heads down and their eyes on the floor. Amara does not know any of this when she signs the paper. Funmi did not warn her, because the last 4 had complained, and the ones before that had complained, and Funmi did not know what to say anymore. She just knows the pay is 32,000 naira, more per month than her other clients, and her brother's final semester fees are due. Tunda, meanwhile, had spent 15 years, looking not in a dramatic way. Quietly, he had placed a small advertisement in the Vanguard newspaper on the 12th of August every year for 5 years, from 2011 to 2015. Always the same wording. If you are the young woman who paid the shortfall at Luth, 3rd floor, on the night of the 12th of August, 2010, I owe you a great debt. Please write to the following post office box. He had received 42 letters over 5 years, every one of them from a woman who was not Amara. He had answered every one of them. He had sent each of them a small sum of money, because he could not tell for certain that any of them was lying, and he did not want to be the man who refused. In 2016, he had hired a small private investigation firm in Yaba to check the Luth staff records for the nurse on duty that night. The nurse had emigrated to Canada. He had written to her in Ottawa. She had replied. She had remembered the girl. She had not remembered her surname. She had described the copper bracelet. She had said the girl looked Ibo. She had said she was young, maybe 18. Tundi had filed the letter in the leather notebook and stopped actively searching. He had not stopped looking. Every time he passed a market, every time he ate at a buka, every time a cleaner walked past his office desk, he looked at her wrist. He looked at her wrist for 15 years. He did not tell anyone he was doing this. He was not sure himself, some days, whether he still believed he would find her. She takes the job. She has been at the Adeyemi residence for 6 weeks. The night of the engagement pre-party, she has never seen Tunde. He sleeps at the Ozumba apartment during the week, and only comes to Ikoyi on Sundays for lunch with his mother. Amara has cleaned every corner of the house, except his study, which is locked. She has never opened the top drawer of the desk in that study. She does not know there is a leather notebook in it. She does not know that on the 3rd page of that notebook, written in the round handwriting of a 14-year-old boy, is one sentence, 6 times, Chiamara, Chiamara, Chiamara. She does not know that Tunde has been looking for her for 15 years, the same way you look for a face in a crowd, quietly, every day, without ever expecting to find it. She does not know any of this yet. She is just here to clean. The day the ring went missing was a Wednesday. It was raining, which was the first thing Amara noticed when she got off the Danfo at Falomo. The second thing she noticed was that the front gate of the Adeyemi residence was open, which was strange, because Francis the gateman did not open the gate for cleaners. Cleaners came through the side. The third thing she noticed was Kemi Balagun standing on the marble steps in a silk robe at 7:50 in the morning, arms folded, waiting. Kemi did not use Amara's name. She had been in the house 6 weeks, and Kemi had not used her name once. Come, now. Amara wiped her feet on the outer mat and followed Kemi up the stairs. Kemi's bedroom was the size of Amara's entire compound. The bed was unmade. The walk-in closet was open, and on the floor of the closet, the small red velvet ring box was empty and lying on its side. Kemi pointed at it with one long fingernail. My ring. She did not raise her voice, and that was worse than shouting. The pear cut, the one my father gave Tund for me, 180 million naira. It is not in the box. Amara's face did not change. She had been a housegirl for 11 years. She knew this scene. She had been in this scene twice before. In 2 other houses. She said the thing you say, madam. I did not touch anything in this room. Kemi smiled. It was not a smile. Of course you didn't touch it. Of course, only. You are the only one who has been in this room since Sunday night. Only so. Let us understand each other. She walked to the door and locked it. She came back and stood very close to Amara. Amara could smell her perfume. It was expensive and slightly sour, like fruit going bad on a hot day. Empty your bag. Amara set the bag on the floor. She opened it. Inside was a small Nokia, a bottle of water, a puff-puff wrapped in wax paper for her lunch, 3 cleaning cloths, a pair of gloves, a pack of chewing gum, and an envelope containing 15,000 naira. The money was Chuka's transport for the rest of the month. Kemi picked up the envelope. She counted the money slowly, 1 note at a time, as if she were teaching a child to count. 15,000 naira. Kemi's voice went soft. A cleaner, carrying 15,000 naira, in a private bag, in my house. She looked up. We know what this is. Amara did not answer. She had learned a long time ago that answering people like Kemi is a game they win. She picked up her phone off the floor, and she pressed a number, and she held the phone to her ear, and she said 1 word. Come. Within 90 seconds, 2 men in cheap black suits walked into the bedroom. They were not police. They were called Mopal by everyone, but they were private security. Kemi's father had put on retainer for the family. One of them was chewing a toothpick. The other one had a rope belt with a truncheon on it. They looked at Amara, the way a mechanic looks at a car that is not going to be worth fixing. The one with the toothpick spoke first. Madam, she confessed. She is about to. Kemi turned to Amara. Give the ring back now and I will not press charges. I will simply have you removed. Keep pretending and you will spend the next 22 months in Kirikiri prison. And your brother, Chuka, isn't it? Chuka Nwosu, final year Unilag. Your brother will not graduate, because there will be no one to pay his fees. Do you understand? Amara understood perfectly. She had understood the moment. Kemi locked the door. She understood that this was not about a ring. She understood that this was not the first time this had happened in this house. She understood, standing there with wine-smelling perfume in her face, and two men breathing behind her, that she had one thing Kemi could not take from her, and it was not fear. She straightened up. She looked Kemi in the eye. She said very quietly, so quietly that the man with the toothpick had to lean in. "Madam, you can search everything I own. You can call every officer in Falomo Station. You can take my job and my brother's fees and my mother's bracelet if you want to. But my name is not for sale, and my dignity does not live in a handbag." The man with the toothpick moved. He grabbed Amara's wrist. He twisted it up behind her back. Not hard enough to break it, hard enough to make a point. The copper bracelet cut into her skin, and a small line of blood appeared on the inside of her wrist. Amara did not make a sound. She looked at the wall. There was a photograph on the wall of Kemi's father shaking hands with a former minister of state. Amara noticed that in the photograph, Kemi's father was smiling with his teeth, but not with his eyes. And she remembered absurdly in that moment something her mother used to say. Her mother used to say, "Watch a man's eyes when he laughs. If the eyes stay flat, the laugh is a business." It was strange, Amara thought, that a saying from a market woman in Iana Ipaja was now describing a chief in Ikoyi. It was the same country. It was always the same country. The man twisted her wrist a little more. She still did not make a sound. She thought about Chuka. She thought about his final year project on solar-powered irrigation pumps that he had described to her, patiently, 3 Sundays in a row, until she had understood the physics of it. She thought about the small graduation ceremony that would happen in 8 months. She was going to be there. She was going to be there in a nice booba she had already picked out on Jumia and put in the saved for later folder. She was going to be there whatever it took. And then somebody knocked on the door. It was a small, polite, old woman knock. 3 taps, Kemi's face changed. "Not now, Mama." Halima Adeyemi's voice came through the door. It was thin, but it was very clear. "Kemi, open the door." There was a pause. Kemi jerked her chin at the man. He let Amara's wrist go. Kemi opened the door. Halima was in a wrapper and slippers. She was leaning on a walking stick. She looked at the 2 security men. She looked at Amara's bleeding wrist. She looked at Kemi, and she did what old Lagos women have been doing to entitled brides for 400 years, which is nothing at all, out loud, in a way that makes the whole room quiet. She just looked, then she said, "Kemi, call Tundi now. Tell him to come home." Kemi laughed, a small brittle laugh. "Mama, it is only a domestic matter. She has taken the ring. She has... Call your husband!" Halima did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She was looking at Amara's wrist, and her eyes had gone somewhere else, somewhere 15 years back. "Call him now, and you." She turned to the security men. "You will step out of my house, and if I ever see your faces on this property again, I will call my son's lawyer, and you will find out how expensive it is to lay a hand on a woman in an Adeyemi residence." They left. Kemi called Tunde. While they waited, Halima crossed the room slowly, and she took Amara's other hand, the one that was not bleeding, and she turned it over and she looked at the copper bracelet on the wrist above it. She did not say anything. She just breathed out through her nose. One long breath, and her hand shook slightly. Amara did not know why. Tundi arrived from Ozumba in 22 minutes, which is a Lagos record. He came in still, holding his car keys. He looked at his mother. He looked at Kemi. He looked at Amara's bloody wrist. He did not say hello to his fiancée. He said, "Francis." The gate man appeared in the doorway. "The CCTV in this room, the one behind the wardrobe. Pull Sunday night to now. Put it on the TV in my study. Do it in the next 4 minutes." Kemi's face went the color of old paper. She had not known there was a camera behind the wardrobe. Tunde had installed it 8 months ago. After his first watch went missing during a party, he had told nobody. They went to the study. Tunde unlocked the door. Amara had never been in this room. It smelled of leather and old paper, and the faint chemical sharpness of printer toner. There was a framed photograph on the wall of a woman who looked like Halima, 30 years younger. There was a heavy dark desk. On the desk was a leather notebook. Amara did not look at it. She was watching the TV screen. Francis put the footage on. It was time-stamped Sunday, 2200 hours. Kemi walked into her own bedroom. She opened the ring box. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment, and then, very carefully, she took the ring out of the box, walked over to the bed, lifted the mattress, and slid the ring underneath. She smoothed the sheet. She closed the box. She left. The room was quiet. Amara did not move. Halima was crying, silently, one hand over her mouth. Kemi's mouth opened. No sound came out. Tundi stood very still. He was looking at Amara's wrist. Then he said, without turning his head, "Kemi, the wedding is off. The merger is off. Your father will hear from my lawyers before the market opens tomorrow. Get out of this house. You have 30 minutes. Kemi started to speak. Tundi raised one finger. She stopped. She left the study. 30 minutes later, she was gone, and then Tundi turned to Amara. He did not touch her. He did not step closer. He said, in a voice that had gone strange, "Let me get you to a clinic. I owe you at least that." In the car, on the way to Reddington Hospital in Victoria Island, because Tunde would not let her sit in a general hospital waiting room with a security-inflicted wrist injury. Amara said nothing for a long time. The car was a black Range Rover, and it smelled of new leather and mint, chewing gum, and something else she could not place, which was probably the specific cologne of people who could afford to sit in an air-conditioned car for 2 hours a day in Lagos traffic without noticing the air conditioning. She was tired. She was so tired. She was thinking about Chuka's fees. She was thinking about whether Clean Grace would fire her over this. She was thinking that even if Kemi was gone, there would be a report, and reports followed you. And Funmi at the agency would have to explain why one of her cleaners had come home from Ikoyi with a wound on her wrist. She was thinking about her mother. Tunda tried to make conversation once. He asked her if she wanted the air conditioning warmer. She said no thank you. He asked her if her wrist hurt. She said, "No thank you, sir." He asked her gently what her full name was. She said Amaranwosu. He did not react to the name. He only nodded. She was so tired that when she finally spoke again, it was not to Tund. It was to herself, the way she talked to herself every time she got to the end of a shift and could not feel her feet. She said it under her breath. "Don't let your mother die like mine did." Tunda's hands went white on the steering wheel. He pulled the car over on the shoulder of Eco Bridge. A Danfo behind him honked and swerved around them. Sat there for maybe 10 seconds without breathing. Then he turned his whole body to look at her. He said, "What did you just say?" Amara blinked. She had not realized she had spoken out loud. "Nothing, sir. Sorry, sir. No." Tunde's voice was very quiet. "Please, say it again." She did not say it again. She looked at him. She looked at his face properly for the first time. She looked at the shape of his jaw and the small scar above his left eyebrow. The scar he had told his mother, at the time, had come from playing football, but which had actually come from the corner of a green plastic chair in a hospital corridor when he was 14 years old. She looked at the way his hands were shaking. She was 33 years old, and she had spent 15 years not thinking about a boy on his knees at a cashier's window. And then she thought about him, and she went very still. Tunde spoke first. "Your accent." It was slightly Ibo that night. It is still slightly Ibo now. I have thought about it for 15 years. "Sir." Amara's voice was even. "I think you have made a mistake." "I have not made a mistake." Tund looked out at the traffic on Eco Bridge. "In November of that year, my mother woke up. I asked her, when she was well enough to talk, whether she had seen the woman who saved her. She said she had not. She said she had felt someone standing at the door of her recovery room once at maybe 4 in the morning. But by the time she opened her eyes fully, the person was gone. We have kept the receipt. She still has it. It is folded inside her prayer book. I want to be very careful now, because I do not want to make your life more complicated than I have already made it today. So I will just ask you one thing, and if you tell me you do not know what I am talking about, I will drive you to the hospital. I will pay you 3 months of severance. I will pay your brother's school fees to graduation, and I will never mention this again. Did you pay the shortfall at the 3rd floor cashier's window at Luth on the 12th of August 2010? Amara did not answer for a long time. She watched the Danfos go past on the bridge. Finally, she said, "Sir, I did not know your name. I did not want to know it. It was not a favor. It was for my mother." Tunde put both his hands on the top of the steering wheel, and he lowered his forehead to the backs of his hands, and he stayed like that for a very long minute. Amara watched. She did not touch him. She did not say anything. When he lifted his head, he had not cried, but his eyes were red. He said, "Amara, I am going to take you to the hospital now, because your wrist is bleeding on my seat, and then I am going to take you home. And I want to ask you for one thing. I am not going to give you anything today. I am not going to write a check today. I am not going to shame you with money. I am asking you to give me 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and at the end of the 3 weeks, please come to a party at my house. Please stay through the party. Do not leave, no matter what happens. Can you do that?" Amara looked at him. She said, "Sir, why?" Tunde said, "Because there is going to be a reckoning in that room, and I want you to see it, because you paid for the reckoning 15 years ago, and you should be the one to watch it happen." Amara said, "Okay." The 3 weeks in between were the quietest and most expensive 3 weeks of Tunde's life. On the Tuesday after the ring incident, he called 4 people into his Ozumba office in a specific order. First, his personal lawyer, a woman named Zainab, who had been his classmate at law school before she had left law school and let him finish alone. He told her everything. She took notes on a yellow legal pad. She asked 2 questions. She left second, KPMG. A forensic audit partner named Mr. Lawal Tunde put a 900 million naira retainer on the table and said, "I need a full 3-year audit of the Balagun ingredients contracts. I need it in 18 days. I need it airtight enough that the SE will accept it without a second opinion." Mr. Lawal did not smile. He said, "You will have it in 17. Third, a private investigator named Victor, who had been the one to trace the Luth nurse to Canada. In 2016, Tunde told him one thing. "Verify that the woman I met yesterday, Amara Nwasu, born in Iyana, Ipaja. Mother deceased August 2010 of kidney failure at Luth, is the same woman who paid the shortfall on my mother's bill on the 12th of August 2010. Do it discreetly. Do not approach her." Victor came back in 11 days with a folder. It contained a copy of Amara's mother's death certificate, dated the 9th of August 2010, 3 days before the Tunde incident. A statement from the yam trader in Iyana Ipaja, who was now retired and living in Ibadan, confirming that Amara's father had paid off his debt only after a long delay. A photograph of Amara at the Uligba junction, laughing at something Mama Ope had said, and wearing the copper bracelet on her left wrist. And a scan of a small entry in a diocese register at Holy Cross Catholic Church in Iyana Paja, recording her mother's funeral, at which Amara had received 50,000 naira in donations, 3 of which she had spent on Dampo fare, and 47 of which had no other record. Tunde had held the folder in his hands for 20 minutes without opening it a second time. Then he had put it in the leather notebook. Fourth and last, he had called Kemi's father to a private lunch at Echo Hotel. He had been polite. He had not shown the audit. He had asked Chief Balagun to consider settling the discrepancy quietly, offering a full refund plus 20% interest. In exchange for Tunde's silence with the regulators, Chief Balagun had laughed at him. Chief Balagun had said, "You are a young man with a big office. Do not confuse an office with power. My daughter is going to be your wife. I am going to be your father-in-law. We will speak like family in 1 month. Tundi had thanked him for the lunch. He had paid for both meals. He had walked out, and he had decided in the elevator that the engagement party would go ahead exactly as planned, and that everyone in that ballroom would learn what a young man's office was worth. Now, 3 weeks later, the Adeyemi engagement party went ahead. This is important. Kemi had begged for it. Her father had called every board member he had ever done business with. Chief Balogun had spent 9 days trying to save the merger, the marriage, the 2.3 billion naira he had been quietly moving off the top of his ingredient contracts for the last 3 years without anyone noticing. Tunde had let the party go ahead. For one reason, he wanted the audience 80 guests, every major shareholder in Adeyemi Pharma, 3 journalists, 2 board members from the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the deputy governor of Lagos State. It was not a party, it was a courtroom, and nobody except Tund, and 1 order, and 1 lawyer knew it. Amara was there because Tund had asked her to be. He had not asked her to come as a guest. He had asked her to come and do her job, exactly as she had always done it, and to trust him for 1 evening. She had said yes because she did not fully understand what he was doing, but she trusted the boy at the cashier's window. And she had decided, sitting on Echo Bridge 3 weeks earlier, that the man he had grown into was still the same boy. She was there in her grey uniform. She was carrying a tray of champagne, and that is when Kemi, who did not know what was coming, who had been told by her father that the party was her last chance to save the situation, who had drunk 2 glasses of white wine before the guests arrived, walked across the ballroom and poured red wine down Amara's chest, in front of 80 people, because she recognized Amara from the study 3 weeks earlier and could not bear it. That was the moment you saw at the start of this story. That was the freeze. That was the copper bracelet rolling to Tunde's shoe. Now watch what happened next. Tunde bent down. He picked up the bracelet. He handed it back to Amara. He did not raise her chin. He did not touch her. He just gave her back the bracelet, and he said, "Thank you for coming. Please stay." Then, he walked to the stage where the string quartet had been playing, and he asked them politely to stop. They stopped. He took a microphone. The ballroom went quiet in the specific Lagos way. Ballrooms go quiet, which is that people keep smiling and stop breathing at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, Tunde's voice was level. Thank you for coming. I owe you an explanation before we go any further. Because what you are about to see is going to change several things about your relationships with several companies in this room. And I want you to have the full picture before you leave. This was supposed to be an engagement party. It is not going to be that. I apologize for the deception. I needed you all in 1 room. Kemi's father stood up at his table. Tund, what is this? Tunde did not look at him. Chief, please sit down. This will be easier for you. There was a projector screen behind him. The technician who had been briefed by Tunde's chief of staff that morning dimmed the ballroom lights and turned it on. The first image was a scanned hospital admission form. Luth, dated 12th of August, 2010. Patient name, Halima Adeyemi. Attending physician, Dr. Femi Okonkwo. Procedure: emergency laparotomy following road traffic collision on Badgry Expressway. Status of payment, paid in full. Tunde's voice went softer. I was 14 years old that night. My mother had been hit by a Maloo on her way home from a business trip. I was in S2. My father had died 2 years earlier. We had no extended family in Lagos. By the time my mother arrived at Luth, she was already in shock. The surgeons agreed to open her up on credit, but they would not close her up without payment. I sat outside that cashier's window from 7 p.m. until 2 in the morning. I begged. I cried. I offered to work at the hospital for the rest of my life. The cashier was not a cruel woman. She just had a system by 11. That night I had 113,000 naira. I needed 160. The shortfall was 47,000 naira. He clicked to the next slide. It was a second scanned document. This one's was an handwritten note from a nurse on Luth letterhead. The handwriting was small and careful. It read, "Shortfall of Lashan 47,000 paid in full by young woman. Name given as Amara Nwosu. Age approx 18, no relation to patient. Paid in cash. Did not wait for receipt. Left the building at 11:47 p.m. Tund clicked again. It was a photograph of a receipt. Real receipt. Carbon copy blue ink faded to almost grey. It had Halima Adeyemi's name on it. It had a total of 160,000 naira on it. It had the same nurse's signature. And clipped to the corner of it, Halima Adeyemi had, for 15 years, kept a small folded piece of paper with a single sentence written on it in a girl's handwriting. "Don't let your mother die like mine did." Halima Adeyemi stood up from her table. She walked across the ballroom in her slippers with her walking stick, and 80 people watched her, and she stopped in front of Amara, and she took the copper bracelet on Amara's wrist between her thumb and forefinger, and she said the first words she had said in that room. "I have been looking for you for 15 years, my daughter." Amara did not cry. She was not going to cry in that room. She just put her hand over Halima's hand, and she held it there. The Tundi clicked again. This slide was different. This was a spreadsheet. The top of the spreadsheet said Balogun. Ingredients, supply contracts. Adeyemi Pharma. Jan 2022 to Sep 2025. Rows of numbers. Red highlights. Tunda spoke over the silence. In the last 3 years, Balogun Ingredients has invoiced Adeyemi Pharma for pharmaceutical raw materials at prices between 18 and 34% above the London benchmark index for identical grade materials. The delta, over 3 years, is 2.31 billion naira. I had an independent audit conducted by KPMG over the last 22 days. The audit will be shared with the Securities and Exchange Commission and with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. I am also effective tonight, terminating all supply contracts with Balogun Ingredients and pursuing full civil recovery. Chief Balogun, you are welcome to respond, but I would suggest first calling your lawyer. Chief Balogun had already sat back down. He was not looking at anyone. He was looking at the tablecloth. Kemi was standing very still by the wall. Tundi clicked one last time. This slide was a screenshot of a WhatsApp conversation. It was between Kemi and a friend named Said. The timestamp was 2 weeks earlier. The messages were short. Kemi had written, "My father says I have to make the maid disappear before the wedding. She is looking at Tun too long. Said, please help me think." Said had replied, "Just plant the ring. She is a house girl. Nobody will believe her." Tunde put the microphone down carefully on the podium. He looked out at the room. "I am not going to say anything more about this. I am going to ask the 3 journalists in this room to please leave now, because you have deadlines. And I will make myself available for on-record comment tomorrow at 10. I am going to ask the SE representative and my board members to stay, because we have work to do tonight. I am going to ask everyone else to enjoy the rest of the food and go home safely. Thank you." He stepped down from the stage. The ballroom did not clap. That is the thing I want you to remember. 80 people, silks and jewelry and imported shoes, and not one of them clapped. Some of them looked at their plates. Some of them looked at Chief Balogun. One older woman, a former commissioner for health, put her hand over her heart and did not move it for a long time. A man at the back, a chairman of a mid-sized bank, quietly took out his phone and cancelled a lunch appointment he had scheduled with Chief Balogun for the following Tuesday, and rescheduled it in the same series of taps with Tunde's chief of staff. That is how these things move. The silence was heavier than applause. The string quartet did not know whether to start playing again. They did not start playing. One of the journalists, a woman from Premium Times whose byline you would recognize, was already writing in shorthand on the back of the menu. She would file her story at 2:47 in the morning. It would run on the front page the next day. Its headline would be, "The Maid, the Receipt, and the Audit. What happened in Ikoyi on Saturday night? Chief Balogun had not moved. His wife had gotten up and left the ballroom. She would not sit at a table with him again for 11 months. Said, the friend Kemi had texted, was sitting 3 tables away. She was very still. She was thinking about a screenshot on her own phone. She was thinking about her own career. She was going to send an email to her employer's ethics office on Monday morning, offering to cooperate with any investigation. She had decided this in the last 90 seconds. That was how she had survived 12 years of a certain type of Ikoyi friendship, by knowing exactly when to jump. And in the middle of the silence, Kemi walked over to Amhara. Her mascara was smeared. Her shoes were off. She was carrying them by the straps. She was not the woman who had poured wine 40 minutes earlier. She opened her mouth and she said, "I'm sorry." Amhara looked at her. She did not say it's okay. She did not smile. She did not extend a hand. She just said, "I heard you. That is all I can do for you tonight." Kemi stood there for another second. She wanted to say more. She wanted to say that she had been raised in a house where women who cleaned floors were not called by their names. She wanted to say that she did not know how else to be a person yet. She wanted to say a lot of things, and she did not say any of them, because she was 26 years old, and it was too late in the evening to become somebody new. She just nodded, once, and walked out of the ballroom. Then Amara turned, and she walked back to the kitchen, because the tray on her arm was still there, and she wanted to put it down properly. That is who she was. She had a tray, it needed to be put down. She put it down. She washed her face in the staff bathroom. She took the Danfo home. It took her 98 minutes because there was a broken-down tanker on Ikorodu Road. She got home at 2:20 in the morning. She took off the grey uniform, which was ruined, and she folded it carefully anyway, because she had been taught to fold clothes properly by a woman who was no longer alive. She lay down on her bed and she looked at the tin roof for a while, and then she went to sleep. 6 months later, on a Wednesday in May, the courtroom on Igbosa Road issued the first ruling in the state versus Balogun Ingredients, Ltd. Chief Balogun was charged with 3 counts of transfer pricing fraud, 2 counts of tax evasion, and 1 count of criminal breach of trust. Bail was set at 120 million naira. It took him 9 hours to raise it. It took the news 3 hours after that to reach Abuja, where Kemi had gone to live with an aunt in Maitama. She had not spoken to her father since the party. She had not spoken to her mother in 11 months. She had been offered a job in Dubai by one of her old friends, and she had turned it down because she did not want to be around people who knew her yet. She was working in a small design studio in Use on a fake name, drawing wedding invitations for other people's weddings, earning 320,000 naira a month, which was less than she used to spend on her hair. She was not happy. She was not doing well. But she was, for the first time in her adult life, alone with herself and paying her own rent. And there were mornings when this felt like a small and difficult kind of freedom. This is not a redemption arc. This is just what happened. By the following month, a Adeyemi farmer had recovered 1.4 billion naira through court-ordered asset seizure and had made public commitment to reinvest the entire sum into what Tunde announced at a press conference on the 22nd of July as the Halaman Wosu Emergency Health Fund. 5 billion naira, seed capital. The fund would sit inside 3 teaching hospitals, Luth in Lagos, Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital in Zaria, and University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital. And it would pay one thing, and one thing only: the shortfall between what a patient could pay and what an emergency procedure cost. It would not fund elective surgery. It would not fund private clinics. It would fund the moment. The moment a 14-year-old boy is on his knees at a cashier's window. The moment a 19-year-old girl is watching her mother stop asking. The fund's director of operations was named Amara Nwosu. She took the job on the condition that she would keep her name on the door. not Tunde's, and that her office would be on the third floor of Luth, not in a corporate tower in Victoria Island. She took a salary of 600,000 naira a month, which she calculated was exactly enough to move her brother into a decent flat in Yaba, pay off her mother's remaining debts in Iyana Ipaja, and save the rest against a master's degree in public health that she was already enrolled in at Unilag. She declined the offer of a company car. She took the Danfo. Chuka graduated from Unilag in November, second class upper. His final year project on solar-powered irrigation pumps won the departmental prize, which came with a small plaque and a check for 75,000 naira. Amara sat in the third row of the graduation hall in a green buba she had bought new. Tund came. Halima came. Chuka did not know who Tundi was. Chuka thought he was one of his sister's colleagues at the Gano she works with, which was how Amara had described her new job to her brother, because she had not yet found the words to explain the rest. When Chuka walked across the stage and shook the vice-chancellor's hand, Amara did not clap. She cried. She cried in the way she had not cried at her mother's funeral 15 years earlier. It came out all at once, and it was not pretty, and Halima passed her a small white handkerchief embroidered with the initials HA, and did not say anything. Afterwards, at a small restaurant on Ozumba, Chuka finally asked. He said, "Sister, what is this Engo really? What do you actually do now?" Amara looked at him. She looked at Tund. She looked at Halima. She took a long breath and she told him, all of it from the corridor at Luth in 2010 to the tray of champagne in Ikoyi. It took her 40 minutes. Chuka did not interrupt her. When she was done, he did not say anything for a long time. He took a sip of his Malta Guinness. Finally, he said, "Sister, why did you never tell me?" Amara said, "I did not think it was a story." Chuka said, "It is a story. It is our whole life. It is why I am sitting in this restaurant." Then he stood up and he walked around the table and he hugged her. And he did not let go for a long time. And Tunde looked at his plate the whole time, because he understood that some things are not for him to look at directly. Tunde asked her to marry him once. It was 3 months after the fund launched. They were sitting on the balcony of the Ikoyi house, and Halima was asleep upstairs. Tunde said, "Amara, I want to be honest with you. I have spent 15 years thinking about your face. I do not want to spend the next 15 years the same way. I want you to marry me." Amara did not answer for a long time. She was watching the lights on the bridge. Finally, she said, "Tund, you do not owe me a marriage. You owed the girl who paid your mother's bill a thank you, and you gave her one, and I took it. If you want to give me more than that, do not give me a ring. Give me a job, and you already have." She stood up. She went and got her bag from the corner. She stopped in the doorway. "And if you love me, which I do not think is the right word for what has happened between us, then let me build the fund. Let me be the person who makes sure that girl in the corridor tonight, wherever she is right now, does not have to give away her funeral money to save a stranger. Let me be that. Do not ask me to be your wife. Ask me to be your equal." He did not ask again. They became friends. They became partners. Once a year, on the 12th of August, they had lunch together at a small buka in Mushin. Halima always came. She always ordered the same amala. She always cried a little at the end, and Amara always held her hand. The fund grew. By the end of its second year, it had paid the shortfall on 9,417 emergency procedures across 3 states. 72% of the patients were women. 61% were under 25. The average shortfall was 39,000 naira. 39,000 naira. Over and over, 9,000 times, the exact shape of the debt that had started it all. The last scene of this story is a simple one. It is a Wednesday afternoon in October. Amara is standing at the cashier's window on the 3rd floor of Luth. She is not paying anything. She is signing a form. Across from her, a girl of about 19 is holding a plastic bag with her mother's clothes in it. The mother is in surgery, 2 doors down. The shortfall is 41,500 naira. Amara signs the form. She pushes it across to the cashier, who is a different woman, now younger, kinder eyes. Amara turns to the girl. She does not touch her. She says quietly, so quietly that only the girl can hear it. Your mother is going to be all right. Go and sit down. Someone will come and get you when she is out of theater. The girl looks at her. She is wearing a school uniform, yellow and green, one of the government secondary schools in Yaba. She has been crying, and she has stopped, because she does not want to cry in front of a stranger. She does not know who Amara is. She does not know that 15 years ago, someone else stood exactly where Amara is standing now, and did exactly this thing, for exactly the same reason. She does not know that in the folder Amara is holding, there are 17 more forms just like hers, from 17 more families, and that by the end of this week, there will be 20 more. She does not need to know. She just goes and sits down on the green plastic chair against the wall. The fluorescent light above her flickers every 18 seconds. Amara notices. She still notices. Amara puts her hand on the copper bracelet on her wrist. She looks at the corridor. She can smell the wet concrete and the old iodine and the particular sourness of a hospital in the rainy season. And she can hear, from far down the corridor, the sound of somebody's phone ringing and somebody answering it in Yoruba and somebody else laughing, tired, at the end of a long shift. She thinks about her mother for 1 second. Then she picks up her folder and she goes to see the next family. A small note from me before you go. I keep telling versions of this story on this channel because I keep meeting the girl in the corridor. Not the billionaire, the girl. She works in the market near my house in Shurli-Lir. She works at the estate gate. She cleans the office 2 floors down from mine. She gave her taxi fare to a stranger on 3rd Mainland Bridge last week, and she will not tell you about it because she does not think it is a story. She thinks it is just a thing that happened. I wanted to make a story of it one time, so that if you meet her tomorrow, at the till, at the gate, at the tray in front of you, you might look at her twice. That is all. If you know someone who is caught between a hospital bill and a coffin, the Nigeria Health Insurance Authority now has a vulnerable group scheme. The number is on the NIA website, and it is worth an afternoon of somebody's time. If you have seen a domestic worker treated the way Amara was treated in that ballroom, the Nigerian Labour Congress Domestic Workers Desk will take your call. And if you were the girl in the corridor once, thank you, I see you. We all see you. Keep going.